Destiny launched on September 9th, 2014. I started playing it when I convinced my dad to buy it for me on my 12th birthday, Halloween that year, and I've been playing this franchise pretty much ever since. That is roughly 3,311 days as of the publishing of this video. Over that time, I've amassed about 5,500 hours of active playtime, time and activities, and about the same amount of time in orbit, in the tower, build crafting, etc. across both games, but mostly Destiny 2. That's a lot of time. I've taken breaks, usually towards the end of seasons, but aside from base game D2 because it fucking sucked, I've played pretty consistently every season without strictly hating the game. I've had times when I didn't like the game as much, like during the hard light meta or when linear SMG was the only loadout that was viable, but I feel that in general this game has been fairly enjoyable. Seasons, while repetitive recently, have had their charm with new themed weapons every season. Crafting has had its downsides, but it has made cool builds and roles more obtainable. PvE has consistently evolved and high-end content has become easier but also more complex due to power creep, additional build options, and more ways to take down champions than ever. All of this has contributed to PvE having more ways to engage than ever, and thus, Destiny 2 is not boring. Right? Well, think of it this way. When one person can nuke an entire room of high-tier ads, what is everyone else supposed to do? Emote? Play Clash Royale? Get rib surgery so you can suck your own... You know what I mean. In almost all except the toughest of content, builds are so powerful that you literally don't even have to play the game. So, builds make the game boring? Also no, because once you get a solid build, you can hypothetically go into higher tier content with said build in order to find difficulty again. The issue though is twofold. Firstly, D2's endgame content is way too focused on team activities. GM Nightfalls, Master Raids, and everything in between all require a pre-made fire team, which just isn't practical for every play session. As an endgame player, due to social anxiety, not having people to play with, or previous bad experiences with LFG that push you away from using it in the future. What this means is that a player like me can hypothetically be skilled enough to run daily master raids, but we can't access that appropriate difficulty activity on a regular basis, which makes the game boring. LFG could hypothetically solve the issue, but since the issue itself is caused by a lack of fun solo experiences, I'd suggest that Bungie add more stuff like that, instead of trying to force the solos to change our entire playstyle. The second part of the issue is a bit more complex, and it has to do with why you even play games in the first place. The main components to a rewarding and therefore fun game are the following: gear progression, difficulty and accomplishment, mechanical challenge, story or lore, and lastly, improvement. There are many others, but I'd posit that these are the main 5 of relevance to Destiny 2. That being said, I'm going to explain why it fails at all of these things for me and other high-end players as well. Destiny 2's gear progression issue is easy to explain if you imagine a particular arcwave grenade launcher called Forbearance. This weapon has the ability to wipe rooms of ads, heal you, and has a very plentiful amount of ammo to boot. It was introduced with Vow of the Disciple 2 years ago, and there hasn't been anything better since to take its place. When too many areas of the game become stagnant like this, gear progression becomes impossible, and I've been at that level in pretty much all areas of the game for a while now. Sure, occasionally something slightly better or unique comes out, and I chase that piece of loot down for some better build crafting or experimenting. However, the fact that my main PvE and PvP loadouts consist of weapons that all came out more than 2 years ago is a massive issue. I get it, power creep bad and all that. But if my gear is as good or better than anything else in the game, and there are no meaningful side grade or customization options to grind, why should I bother getting new rewards? This wouldn't be a problem, however, if there were other reasons to play besides progression, so let's move on. For difficulty and accomplishment, we come back to the team issue. Everything that would be hard enough for me to engage with requires a team, and accessing a team whenever I feel like playing isn't feasible. Nor would it ever be due to the fact that I'm a very antisocial person who finds the process of gathering and then managing a raid or trials team to be a nightmare. There are solo activities in Destiny 2 that are difficult. However, they tend to carry a very high penalty for death, making them frustrating, or they aren't very rewarding loot or resource-wise. For example, dying in a solo dungeon resets the encounter, and with boss health made for 3 players, that can be half an hour plus worth of progress because of a simple mistake. This tends to make solo activities tedious more than hard, as you've got to play cautious rather than fun. This also rewards you the exact same as a normal 3-man clear, which is not only faster, but also easier, which means solo dungeons are simply inefficient as well. The solo campaign could be a solution to this, but the only rewarding missions after your first clear on each character are the weekly featured ones which you can grind for Ascendant alloys. And guess what? They don't scale like the regular campaign, making them ridiculously hard to solo and impossible to do so efficiently. Therefore, there are very few, if any, well-designed paths for solo high-end players to play significantly stimulating content that rewards them for doing so, and it makes the game boring for high-end players. As a side note, higher difficulty lost sectors are being improved rewards-wise with gunsmith engrams to help with world drop loot acquisition. That being said, they're still really annoying as you only have access to one a day, and champions severely limit your potential loadout choices. It's a good step forward, but we still need a wider variety of solo-friendly content. Moving on to mechanical challenge. I kind of lied to you. See, Destiny 2 is honestly one of the best games out there if you enjoy mechanical mastery, but Bungie seems to push back against that at every possible turn. Worldline skating was removed, and Eager Edge caught multiple nerfs for breaking the game when all it did was allow faster movement. Weird boss design that favors running low skill options and frequently forces the use of divinity to counteract chaotic boss movement seems to become more prevalent with every season. Additionally, there has been a consistent move away from skill-intensive or speedrun-friendly content towards activities I've classified with the acronym NULL, which stands for non-autonomous, unimprovable, and low effort. These are things that require your attention, but you can't put more effort into them to make them go faster. An example of a null activity is driving down a long highway late at night, or grinding Dares of Eternity. You can't just mindlessly grind while reading or something because you must be paying attention, but attempting to go faster by mastering the activity achieves nothing for you. You can't drive down the highway faster unless you want to break the law, and you can't force your entire Dares team to all of a sudden become Salted Greppo when DPSing the dumbass teleporting Vex Minotaur. A perfect example of this shift is the remake of Lake of Shadows. The original was really fun to speedrun with a bunch of fun tricks to go faster, and I used to do so for fun quite often. But the version we're stuck with now is quite literally an auto-scroller in some sections, purely for the sake of making the strike slower. As for PvP, it's in a very similar boat, with systems like aim assist being overtuned to make up for bad netcode, and airborne effectiveness attempting to limit the skill gap, seemingly so that lower skilled players can shit on you with their skillless fusion rifles even more. I really hate fusion rifles. Fuck fusion rifles. In conclusion, the game has a massive mechanical skill gap, but Bungie really seems to hate it. Moving on, this one's going to be fast. Why doesn't the story provide any engagement for me? Well, there are characters and plot points that don't fit the narrative of D2, like the Cloud Striders or Neomuna as a whole. Bad story writing that makes characters that are supposed to be intelligent behave like 13-year-olds. Awful fight choreography and the few cutscenes wherein characters don't just stand there and look at each other. Terrible dialogue that makes my ears bleed every time Nimbus talks. Continuity destroying plot holes like Paracausal Bullets, Rasputin in general, or Anna Bray being the most convenient Schrodinger's cat of all time. I can go on and on. Some people love the story of Destiny. That used to be me. However, I lost my respect for the story when the story stopped respecting my knowledge of it. Thus, it does not engage me anymore. Now for the last point. Let's talk improvement. This is the biggest section. Destiny 2 is the game for getting better, at least to a certain point. There are a ton of build options, but very few hold up to Fireteam interference or game RNG. What this means is you're going to pick a Fireteam interference resilient build, or 5, learn the playstyles in and out, and once you've mastered them, there is no need to swap off. Sure, you can change builds for the fuck of it, but losing power never feels fun. That being said, good solo players have literally no need of good builds when every activity that doesn't require a team is null anyway. However, we're just going to run those overpowered builds anyway, crush the poor level 1 dregs in whatever activity we're running, under our boots, and be extremely bored while we do it, because, well, there's no challenge. That being said, I'm a PvP player anyway, so what do I know? Wait, I have more PvE experience than 99% of players too. Fuck. I have no life. As for where PvP fits into this whole discussion of D2 being boring, this area, improvement, is why I actually kept playing D2 in the first place. See, I've had a simple goal throughout my Destiny 2 career. Become good at Crucible. A rather simple goal, but it kept me playing through at least 1,000 matches of Forsaken Era competitive in order to improve, and it kept me playing through 768 Rumble matches last season fighting for top 100, which unfortunately I didn't achieve as I got stuck around rank 169, mostly due to fusion rifles because I refused to use, meta, but it is what it is. That being said, let's run through my history of interacting with PvP to understand exactly why I think it's become boring. See, I enjoyed PvP even when it got so little support that people thought Bungie had forgotten it existed. So, when Bungie kept making promises about improved PvP focus and a gunplay-focused sandbox, I was pretty excited, right? Imagine my frustration then that the moment Bungie decided to dedicate more resources to PvP, it got significantly worse for higher skilled players. Firstly, skill-based matchmaking came back with a vengeance, and literally ruined the 6v6 experience for us by making bad connections and meta spam much more prevalent. And fun chases like 50 kill games or goofy 7th columns became basically impossible, at least for me. Even Iron Banner, which was at one point widely loved due to the cool mix-up of 6v6 party-style modes like Eruption, Rift, and Fortress, became one of the most hated playlists in PvP once quote-unquote loose SPMM was brought into it. The only thing loose about SBMM is how loose your mom was after okay. To add to this, certain playlists that Bungie tells us are connection-based matchmaking end up actually being skill-based, which not only weakens our trust in Bungie, but also significantly worsens or even ruins the experience in new playlists like Checkmate. If you want an example of this, look at Checkmate Control. I went back and averaged the lobby KDs, the average career kills divided by career deaths of every player in the lobby, from my most recent stream, and found the lobbies I had played in had an average 1.39 KD over 19 matches. While this is astoundingly high, it isn't certifiable proof of SBMM. I'd need more testing and math for it to be definitive. However, when you combine it with my abnormally long queue times during peak player population hours, it becomes fairly solid evidence of matchmaking muddling of some sort. And we even have a precedent for something similar happening with Supremacy when it was first added to the Relentless Rotator as well. That being said, Bungie did publicly admit to the Supremacy bug and fixed it as well. They haven't done the same for Checkmate, so maybe I just happened to get unlucky. 19 matches in a row, in a playlist with an extremely high player population. Yeah, I really don't know. Now let's talk Trials matchmaking. This is a huge problem. When Trials matchmaking became fireteam based, trios became basically unplayable, and because of that, carries became significantly harder if not impossible to pull off. This kills much of the fun experienced players have in Trials because once you have all your loot, there isn't much else to do. It also makes lower skilled players more timid to join a team or run with a duo because they know that by simply existing on the team, they are making the matches much harder. As for the actual guns being used in PvP, loot that would be fun to mess around with is made harder to chase with random unfocusable rare drops. But at the same time, meta picks are often easily target farmed or even craftable with enhanced perks that edge out normal weapons by a large margin, making the sandbox feel samey and unchanging. That isn't to say I want loot to be harder to acquire, as I'd actually love it if every weapon in the game was craftable or at least enhanceable. What I'm asking for is for Bungie to work on loot diversity and obtainability across the sandbox so that those niche options are not only viable, but also legitimately obtainable. Speaking of the sandbox, hand cannons, which are the high skill community's favorite weapon type, haven't been competitive against pulse rifles or auto rifles on controller for literal years at this point. And even then, perks like Eye of the Storm, Zen Moment, Opening Shot, and Headseeker on all three of those weapon types make role variants literally non-existent. Additionally, snipers perform completely differently on controller and M&K due to intrinsic aiming differences with each input, but Bungie continues to balance and matchmake us together, which makes aggressive sniping on controller feel like absolute shit, because if you take even 3 marshmallows to the face, have even a smidge of connection fuckery, or can't manage aiming with the goofy-ass square dead zone they give us on controller. What the fuck is that about? You can't hit anything at all, due to the fact that snipers are balanced for aiming only possible in M&K. It's pretty fucking stupid. Weapons in general are also much more niche now, as Bungie is trying to make dedicated range bands where each weapon functions best. While this may sound decent on paper, in-game it just means gunfights are that much less flexible, and thus, much less fun. Don't even get me started on bows, sidearms, fusion rifles, or breach GLs, because those are weapons that straight up don't belong in PvP at all. Moving on. Controller reticle friction, or how sticky your aim is once you acquire a target, is cranked way up to try to make us viable against M&K. But then Bungie fails to recognize that SMGs and ARs, which are both meta right now, outperform M&K anyway, because auto-tracking will always trump having to do it manually. The aim assist also makes controller versus controller gunfights pretty ridiculous, because it's effectively who can lock onto whose head first, which is often determined by already shaky connections or who gets the unlucky flinch or recoil pattern, which is of course 100% RNG, and 100% feels like shit. Moving on to connections before I mauled about the sandbox anymore, the connection between Xboxes has always been rocky at best, but when Bungie added crossplay, they must have been smoking something, because holy shit, PlayStation and Xbox crossplay connections are maybe the worst I think I've ever seen in a PvP game ever. It's so bad that I take off my sniper or hand cannon when I'm facing most PlayStation players because I know that a precision weapon simply will not hit them. As if it wasn't already bad enough, SBMM further exacerbates this issue, and low player population from myriad issues makes it even worse. Connections have never been Destiny's forte, as it's a peer-to-peer game, but they are in a seriously dire state on console, where, need I remind you, 2/3 of the player base resides. All that complaining / issue highlighting aside, PvP remains the most replayable part of the game, as it's the only part that is actually challenging in a fun way for me. Skill bands are actually wide enough that I have a chance to breathe now, and while I can't run whatever I want, if a build is solid, I can actually get some mileage out of it instead of simply getting gamed stolen by PK Titans. I can also use hand cannon shoddy to some success given I'm putting in 110% effort and the lobby isn't too harsh. So, is Destiny 2 boring, or am I just sick of it? I think that if Destiny and I have been in a relationship, I've been consistently asking it to quit smoking crack for 9 years and it simply refuses to listen to me. Or it pretends to for a while, and then does some really stupid out-of-touch shit like adding SBMM in a game that clearly can't handle it, or nerfing weird shit that isn't even an issue, which disappoints me all over again. I've been complaining about the same fucking issues for years now, and they never get addressed. I and the whole PvP community get ignored for years, just to finally get the attention we deserve for being so dedicated, and Bungie spits in our collective faces repeatedly and then says they're really sorry and that they're fine-tuning to get it right. No, you idiot, you've never gotten it right, and I'm so fucking tired of making the same fucking observations and giving the same feedback over and over and over. Whoa. Almost lost my cool there. I'm gonna do more analytical style content like this in the future. So if you like my ranting, stick around and consider subscribing. Otherwise, thanks for watching. Hit the like and sub buttons on the way out. See you next time. I'm gone.